Today's youth need teachers, volunteers, and most of all, well, they need you. I'm Doug Edwards, and I'm going to be talking with real youth mentors and students to give you the knowledge you need to be the best youth worker possible. This is Youth Worker on Fire.
Oh, you're trying to bring me down and run me out of town. You're taking what you want, but you can't take my rhythm now. I'm walking to my own beat, just gonna be me. I'm not replicating nobody.
So here we are in the new year, right when you need stuff the most, right when you need to hear something from God, you'll end up hearing it, or someone will show up or something. But I'm going to start off with the prologue to the book Whisper, How to Hear the Voice of God, from Mark Batterson. Now, I like a lot of stuff by Batterson. I did the 40-day prayer challenge over and over and over again. I didn't think I'd get through it one time, and I ended up doing it many, many times. But here's the beginning, the prologue. It says, the Tomatis effect. Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening, 1 Samuel 3:9. And more than half a century ago, Dr. Alfred Tomatis was confronted with the most curious case of his 50-year career as an otolaryngologist. A renowned opera singer had mysteriously lost his ability to hit certain notes, even though those notes were well within his vocal range. He had been to other ear, nose, and throat specialists, all of whom thought it was a vocal problem. Dr. Tomatis thought otherwise. Using a sonometer, Dr. Tomatis discovered that even an average opera singer produces 140 decibel sound waves at a meter's distance. That's slightly louder than a military jet taking off from an aircraft carrier, and the sound is even louder inside one's skull. That discovery led to a diagnosis. The opera singer had been deafened by the sound of his own voice. Selective muteness was caused by selective deafness. If you can't hear a note, you can't sing that note. In Dr. Tomatis' words, the voice can only reproduce what the ear can hear. The French Academy of Medicine dubbed it the Tomatis effect. I'm guessing you, like me, according to this is Batterson speaking here, have your fair share of problems, and your problem-solving techniques might be as effective as mine, which isn't very. Maybe that's because we're treating symptoms while ignoring the root cause, a spiritual Tomatis effect. It is possible that what we perceive to be relational, emotional, and spiritual problems are actually hearing problems, ears that have been deafened to the voice of God. And it's that inability to hear his voice that causes us to lose our voice and lose our way. Let me make a bold statement at the beginning of this book. This is the prologue once again. Learning how to hear the voice of God is the solution to 1,000 problems. It's also the key to discovering our destiny and fulfilling our potential. His voice is love. His voice is power. His voice is healing. His voice is wisdom. His voice is joy. If your life is off-key, maybe it's because you've been deafened by the negative self-talk that doesn't let God get a word in edgewise. Maybe you've listened to the voice of criticism so long you can't believe anything else about yourself. Or maybe it's the enemy's voice of condemnation that speaks lies about who you really are. If you don't silence those competing voices, they'll eventually deafen you. You won't be able to sing God's song because you won't be able to hear his voice. Is God's voice the loudest voice in your life? That's the question. If the answer is no, that's the problem. And so here's one thing that he says. But trust me, he says, though you want to hear what he has to say, are you ready? Here's the 7-word prayer that can change your life. Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening. That prayer is easier said than done, no doubt. But if you meant what you just prayed, your life is about to change for the better. So I prayed that the other day, read this a few days ago. Now I'd read this book a while back because it was sent to me. I like the person I know, Ken Davis, who's a great communicator. He's really old now, and I just heard him speak on the same platform that Tim Tebow did, and we're going to talk about those things. And it's the Be Bold for Jesus Conference, Be Bold for Jesus Conference 2022. And I couldn't believe that Ken Davis was speaking there. Tim Tebow spoke before that. But the first thing that happened today, my wife is gone with her two sisters. There's five children in their family. This podcast is where I'm still full-time in student ministry to encourage youth workers, to encourage parents, grandparents, students who will end up listening to this, people who are volunteers in student ministry and all those things, and teachers and school administrators, because all those people have had major influence on my life as I was in student ministry, and because of Youth for Christ, learned to deal and love community, not just being in the walls of a church building or denomination, but to be able to see much farther beyond, which is what Jesus did, which is why my wife and I started watching The Chosen, which has been out for a while. We started watching the series, and it's amazing how Jesus communicates in such a clear way. And what he did was the church was really irritated by him, which was a setup for his death and also a setup to say, listen, God is here, but not in the way you thought he would be. So here I am, and this is God, and this is what he looks like, and I am God, and so they killed him. Doesn't look like a real fun ending, and did the same things to his disciples, and yet he tells us to follow him in the same way. So today, I'm going through a little bit of anxiety, depression. When I say depression, I don't mean that, I'm terrible, I'm horrible. No. It's just that's my artistic side that doesn't get to come out too much. My alone side, even though I'm with a lot of people, love the people at work. But just my wife is gone for a while. I've been with my children last weekend. But as per usual, I will always say things that irritate people, including my family, or make them upset or make them happy or whatever, because and Ken Davis, when I heard him, he talked about the same thing, that he has weird things that come out of his mouth all the time that have always gotten him in trouble. But that's why he's also an international communicator and teaches people communication. So other than getting up this morning and taking my dog Cooper out and feeding him, treats that he's not supposed to have because I feed him too many treats, I do start doing my devotions but I get a phone call from my sister, Deanna. Deanna, now there are 4 siblings in my family. There's Deborah, there's myself, there's Deanna, there's Dawn. And Deanna was born with immediate complications. And those complications came from, I found out just a while back, was from the government and doctors telling my mom, along with a lot of other pregnant women across the United States, that the polio vaccine that was taken with a sugar cube at that time was safe for pregnant women, not a problem. And come to find out, not only my sister that was born, but others born around that same time that were friends of our family had the same problems that Deanna had, which was she would have complications physically for the rest of her life. But she calls me today and she says, hey, just want you to know, just in case we get too tired tonight, Happy New Year and happy birthday, because January 1st is my birthday. So she called me, encouraged me today. Here is my sister who's gone through more pain than I'll ever go through. Here we are, and I get a second phone call. So there's three things that happened today, and if you want to count Ken Davis, that's 4. But in reality, it was the same conference. But I get a call from another friend today. His name is Dr. Harold Kelly. Now, how I met Harold in the first place was that he was my son Christopher's middle school basketball coach. And he was also, when he was in college, he was at FAMU, but he was also on Bobby Bowden's FCA group. And I think he was very close to Bobby from what he said. Even though he was at FAMU and played football there, Bobby took him under his wing and He was a part of those first years of Fellowship of Christian Athletes at FSU, Florida State University. So Harold and I we probably talk maybe twice a year now, but when he was a middle school coach, he was a phenomenal beyond belief coach, and he calls me today, and it was a real encouragement because I was just going through, I was really down today. It was one of those days. That's why I'm doing this particular episode, because everybody gets down. Everybody goes through some form of depression. And if you're doing anything in leadership, you know what that depression wall is. It hits leaders like it hits nobody else. So Harold calls me, and that's a great encouragement. And Harold, not knowing it, reminded me that he's one of the scary people in my life. Now, I told him that, and I reminded him of that. And I said, God, just remind me, you're one of the scary people. And I said, and I don't mean that negatively. Scary people are the people that we all need in our life that do things so far beyond what we do that it encourages us to go beyond what we're doing. And God has put several people like that in my life. You need those people in your life. You don't need people that are going to make you feel comfortable. You need people that are going to encourage you to go beyond your comfortability so that you keep living life all the way to the very end. And that's what Harold did. And so he calls me today. He said, man, I thought of you this morning. I wanted to call you. And he coached my son, Christopher. And he said, listen, he pulled me aside because we knew each other a little bit. And he said, I want you to know Chris is going to sit the bench. He said, I am here to win these games with these students and help them to understand what winning is. And the skill level of these middle school students is going to blow people's minds. And your son is not going to be to that level yet. I said, listen, coach, I know who you are. He's also a pastor. And I said, I want him to learn the integrity of a coach that loves Jesus and is excellent. I said, I'd rather him sit the bench with you than to play on the line, and get in the game all the time with somebody else. And occasionally you put him in. So Coach calls me today, and he's telling me about the things he's doing for his family and all kinds of different construction that's going on. I mean, physical construction in the building area, things that he's doing in the farm area, and what God is doing with him, and things that he's doing in the church area, and a service that he's getting ready to start. And so I'm just listening to this stuff. I'm saying, Coach, it's just, you just have no idea how much I need to hear from you today and just the things that you're telling me. So I'm telling you this, that God, when you call on him, when you say, Lord, it's your servant, I'm here, I'm listening, that things are going to start happening. And here it was just a day later, and I start getting phone calls. And so a text group of men that do a Bible study, I don't communicate much with them. I just, look at what's there. They keep saying, okay, we're going to use the Tim Tebow book. We're going to use the new Tim Tebow book, and we're going to that's going to be our devotions for the rest of this next year coming up. And so I thought, I don't even know which book this is. Let me find out what Tim Tebow's book is. And then I see a story on his wife, Demi, and who basically became Miss South Africa, and then she became, Miss Universe pageant. She became Miss Universe, and just an amazing believer and Christian on her own, gone through some very difficult times herself. And it was through her invalid sister, half-sister, because her parents had divorced, that she and Tim ended up meeting because of his program that he does, his prom that he puts on for students that are 14 of ages and older who are special needs people with all kinds of disabilities, physical, mental, etc. And he's been doing this for probably a decade at least. He met her, his now wife, Demi, through that conference, that prom that he puts on all over the United States, maybe other parts of the world. And she showed up with her sister. And it was through her sister that they met, and they ended up getting married. But he's at this conference, Be Bold for Jesus Conference 2022, the same thing that Ken Davis is at. And he is talking about all of his accolades and different things in being bold for Jesus. And he makes this statement. He says, and I've never really been that bold for Jesus. Now, we look at Tim. You look at him, his physique is amazing. He played not only national champion in college football for the University of Florida, but he ends up playing in the pros for Denver and then for the Jets, and then just getting released and nobody wants him. And he's going, what is this? Why, and all this. And God, keeps blessing his ministry, though, and all the different things he does. And then he's announcer for one of the sports networks. And his popularity keeps growing and growing and growing, even though his football career seems to be completely over. And then his wife adds to that because she is a world figure in her own right, and just an amazing thing. And he's standing up there going, I have not been to that level of boldness. And he talks about this particular little monk during the gladiator games, and I don't remember the name of the monk. I didn't write it down. You can go look it up. You'll find it. I'd heard this story before. But he talks about just the agony, first of all, that he went through, deciding to go to the University of Florida, and he was looking at Alabama, and he's looking at USC and all these places. And he said it was 2 minutes. He was all the way up to going up to the podium to tell them where he was going to, which university he was going to, and no one would help him. He said, God's going to make the right. You've always made good decisions. You're going to make the right decision. Mom, Dad, tell me what to do. Tell me which place to go. And they said, you're going to make the right decision. Went to his coach, you're going to make the right decision. Just tell me where to go. And because he's getting ready to go up, and at his high school, the high school auditorium is packed, where he's going to announce to the United States which university he's going to go to. And he doesn't know to the moment. It's between Alabama and University of Florida. And you'll have to go to that YouTube and look that up. Tim Tebow, Be Bold for Jesus Conference 2022, and you'll hear the story. There's too much of that there. And he talks about how even after he makes the decision, he is asking his mom for her bag because she has motion sickness. She said, Mom, can you give me one of your paper bags? He said, I'm going to be sick. This is after he's made his decision to go to University of Florida. And everybody knows how that came out, and it was the right decision and all those things. But I never heard that story. So he's throwing up in the backseat of the car after he's made the decision. But he's speaking at this conference, and he's going all the way to, I have never been that bold, the way that Jesus is talking about being bold and the way his disciples had to be. And he talked about Alexander the Great and how Alexander the Great, would march his guys, showed this one city, his whole army hadn't even showed up. And the guy said, you're not a threat to us. And they only saw the small portion of his army. And he started having his guys, his soldiers loved him so much, believed him so much. He had them march forward till they would march over the cliff to their death. And 10 of them marched over the cliff and just marched straight over and died. Tim Tebow's telling the story. And finally he says, stop, enough. And the rest of the soldiers came back to his side. And he put terror into the city of this king and his army. And from my understanding, they gave it up. He said, even that's not the type of boldness we're talking about, because he let his men die for him. He said, here Jesus comes up and he's going, no, I've got this. I'm going to die for you. I'm going to take your sin on me. I'm going to walk to the edge of the cliff. I'm going to show you the type of boldness that you're going to have someday, because I'm going to do it for you first. And he goes to his death. He said, that's the type of boldness we're talking about. And then he talks about this monk, that the reason that the gladiators in Rome in the Colosseum, and my son Ryan sent me a picture of when he was in Rome and they stayed right across the Colosseum, and he'd go across and do his devotions. And he's got a great picture of him standing there in that Rome Colosseum. It's just a great picture. I guess Brittany took it for him because his back is to us and we're looking into the Colosseum. But this little monk, he was just appalled by the death and destruction that the Colosseum would be full of people cheering people on, killing other people, and later killing Christians and all those things. And this little monk goes out into the middle and he says, enough. You've got to stop. You've got to stop killing each other. Stop doing this. In Christ's name, stop doing this. And then the gladiators turned on him and start stabbing him, and the crowd starts laughing at him and starts throwing things at him as he's bleeding. out on the ground, and he lifts his voice again. He says, "In the name of Christ, stop." And it was 3 days later that the emperor at that time put a stop to the killings of gladiators and to the destruction of Christians in the Colosseum. And what he says, that's the type of boldness we're talking about. He says, you may not be someone like me who could do all these things and be a spotlight, through sports or whatever. And you're saying, well, what could I do? What could I ever do? And he says, you just have to simply hear God's voice and do what he wants you to do. And that's what this book whisper is saying. Say, Lord, I'm your servant. I'm listening. Pray that prayer. And all of that came from yesterday, me praying that prayer, and all the things that have happened to me today. And the day's not over, and I don't know what the future holds for me. I don't know what it's going to hold for my family. I know my children are amazing and are great, and some days they look at me and they go, Dad, why are you doing what you're doing? Why do you do what you do? Can't you just stop long enough? Can't you just stop now? Can't we just see life the way it is? And there's days I just want to go, no more podcasts, no more trying to write books, no more. Nobody's paying me to do this anymore. I used to have this joke, and I would say it to my staff, to my volunteer staff, and I would go, I am paid to be good, and you guys are good for nothing. And they would laugh and laugh and laugh, and I'm going, man, if I knew just being sarcastic and saying rude jokes to you would make you laugh, I'd have done that a long time ago. And for some reason, that makes them laugh. But now I am one of those that is also not paid to be good, but I'm good for nothing. And we're putting these things out. And so we're praying that God will reach you, whoever is listening, and will be encouraged to go long and go far. And so my prayer for you is to have a great day. Have a lot of fun today. Have a lot of joy, because joy comes from God. Go make somebody feel good about themselves today. All right. This is Doug Edwards with Youth Worker on Fire, but I'm not here just for youth workers. I'm here for anyone who will listen. Adios. Until next time.
You've been listening to the Youth Worker on Fire podcast. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and tell your friends. Also, leave a comment and tell us what you think. Stay tuned for more informative episodes.